I'm Maggie Rayfield. I'm a clinical psychologist, and for the last year I've been working with people affected by lymphoma. A diagnosis of lymphoma can bring many challenges, not just for the person with the diagnosis, but for their relatives or friends or carers. For example, there can be a lot of uncertainty, or you might need to come to terms with having a long-term illness. This can generate a lot of unpleasant or unwelcome feelings, but there are things you can do to help yourself. First of all, you can talk to people you know, friends or family. It helps to get out your feelings rather than keeping them all to yourself. Or if you don't feel happy with that or comfortable doing that, you can write down your feelings, keep a diary, or draw pictures or use some artistic outlet, or perhaps turn to music. Just some way of getting your feelings out, because I think it can really help just to kind of get it out of yourself. Another thing you can do is identify why you're feeling, say, worried, why in particular. So if you're having all these feelings or these butterflies or palpitations perhaps, try and work out what it is in particular that is worrying you this specific time. So for example, it could be that you're worried about going out, you've had treatment, you've lost your hair, and you're worried about how that might look to others and what people might say. I think it can really help to know exactly what it is that you're worrying about, because then it can lead on to a plan of action. So if, for example, it is you're worried about going out in public having had the treatment, and worried about how you look, perhaps it would help at first to go with other people, with a friend. Or you might want to rehearse how you might respond to questions about whether you're ill and what kind of treatment you've had. Something else that can be really helpful is breathing control. So not just deep breathing, although that can help, but breathing in a very sort of controlled way. For example, breathe in through your nose for 7 counts. Hold it there and then breathe out slowly for 11. That's 7 for the breath in, 11 for the breath out. If you lie down doing this to start with and have a hand on your chest and on your belly, try to make the hand on your belly move it up more than the one on your chest when you're breathing in. So that shows that you're really breathing deeply and using the diaphragm, which could be even more effective. There are also things that you might be doing that can make things a little bit worse. So for example, reading a lot on the internet about lymphoma or about your difficulties can start to become unhelpful after a while. Some websites may not be entirely trustworthy, and certainly reading a lot about it keeps you focused on the difficult things rather than on moving forwards. Also, it may be tempting to think about how life has changed since your diagnosis, and I think although that's really important, focusing too much on what you can't do anymore can also bring about some of these unpleasant feelings. So perhaps instead of focusing too much on what you've lost, think more about how you can build things up in the future, or take the opportunity to do something new. So for example, if you've had to leave work because of your lymphoma, maybe it's a good time to sit and think about what you could do differently, or another job you can do in the future, or other ways to fill your time. Another thing that can be difficult is being around people who you do not find so supportive, or people you don't feel you can really open up to. It can be helpful to think about the people you do feel comfortable with and spend more time with them. If you decide you'd like additional support, there are a number of options for you. First of all, there's the Lymphoma Association support groups that are available nationwide. You can find out your local one by looking on the website. There you will find people who are also affected by lymphoma, so they may have lymphoma or have had it, or they may be a partner or relative or friend of somebody who has. You may just like to go online and seek support from other people who have been through something similar, but from a distance using your computer. You can do that through the Lymphoma Association. There are a number of forums that you can access, and a Facebook group as well. In addition, there is a Lymphoma Association support line, which you can reach on 0808 808 5555 during office hours. And there are trained people there who have access to a whole lot of information and can offer you support. If you'd prefer more one-to-one support, there are counsellors who can help. They are people who are trained to help others with personal or psychological problems. And there you can go and talk to them one-to-one about these difficulties you've been having. And they will help you in a secure environment They'll help you explore your difficulties and think about ways to go forward. Normally they would offer a number of sessions and perhaps a review at the end. There are also clinical psychologists like myself. We're trained a little differently. We're trained by the NHS, and we specialise in the assessment and treatment of mental health difficulties. Again, we would use a type of therapy, talking therapy, and the first session would be an assessment where you can discuss any of your concerns about therapy as well. But typically, we would use a more structured approach, perhaps cognitive behavioural therapy or other evidence-based approaches to deal with a particular issue that you raise and goals that you want to work towards. You can access both counsellors and clinical psychologists privately and sometimes through the NHS. You might be able to access a therapist via a new scheme called Increasing Access to Psychological Therapy. There should be one in every area. You can also see a counsellor or a clinical psychologist privately. There are registers out there, for example with the BPS, the British Psychological Society, that's www.bps.org, and you can find out what therapists there are in your area, and they will have all been vetted or at least approved by the organisation with which they're registered. I would always recommend you do your research before seeing a counsellor or a clinical psychologist. Look for recommendations, look at their websites, look for their qualifications and see which organisations they're registered with. Counselling and clinical psychology sessions privately can cost up to around £100 per session, but there's wide variation and it's worth finding out before you arrange an appointment with somebody. Usually it will mention it on their website. Counselling or clinical psychology sessions can be hard work. I think sometimes people make the first step, which is fantastic, and they arrange the appointment and they meet with the counsellor and there's an assessment done, but then it can feel like hard work because ultimately it comes down to the person to make their own changes. I would just say, don't give up. It's important, it will be tough, it's important to expect it to be tough, but keep going because it can be really helpful.